boy. Welcome, everybody, to the Arts Center. My name is John Schreiber, and I'm happy to be the CEO of this great place. And you know what? You give the people what they want, and they show up. So there. Thank you, Carla and Lata. The responses were so enormous, I was almost inclined to call Carla and say, can we add a second show? But I know she's got other fish to fry. We are delighted to welcome a Wall Street superstar and an inspiring motivational speaker, and that's Carla Harris, here to the Arts Center. Carla will be talking about leadership and how our understanding of what makes a good leader has changed in recent years. And she'll be in conversation with a dear friend of mine and of many of us, and anybody who cares about the future of Newark, and that's Reddy of Prudential Financial. I want to thank the sponsors who make these wonderful gatherings possible. That's PNC Bank and United Airlines, and this particular Business Partners Roundtable, and this is why there are so many people in the room, is co-sponsored by the Arts Center Sisterhood for Good, Women at NJPAC. Yay for Women at NJPAC. I also want to thank Joel Sherman, who is here, and Joel is the chair of our Business Partners Committee. He helps us workshop and organize these events. And I also want to thank Glenda Pinto from United, one of our sponsors this morning, who also serves on the committee. Glenda has given each of us a notebook and a pen, so we are now obliged to take excellent notes and deliver a term paper, within the next 48 hours. I also want to acknowledge our NJPAC board members and women at NJPAC trustees who are with us today, including the remarkable Mindy Cohen, who happens to be both an Arts Center board member and a Women at NJPAC co-president, and also Women at NJPAC trustees, Chanel McLeod, Tammy Jones, Shanae Harris, Deb Belfato, Philomena Macklitter, Helen Arcanto, and Rhonda Richard. Thank you for your leadership. These roundtables are a benefit for members of our Business Partners Corporate Philanthropy Program, their guests, and their employees. I'm happy to tell you that there are 90 business partners that support NJPAC's work and mission. That might sound like a lot, but I promise you there's room for more, okay? If you are not one, you are welcome to join this wonderful cohort. Today's event is an example of the type of programs we produce for our partners. At our next roundtable, we'll be convening about AI and its focus on and its effect on business, creativity, and education. This will be a fascinating discussion. We'll send you a save the date soon. I'm particularly excited about this because I don't know about you, but I am entirely illiterate and scared of AI. So, I'll own it, but I'm so looking forward to learning more. To give you a sense of what our Business Partners program is like, I want to hand over the mic just for a minute to one particular business partner who does an exemplary job of maximizing their involvement with the Arts Center. Here to tell you more is Lori Rabinowitz. She's the Senior Vice President and Financial Advisor of the Green Jade Group at Morgan Stanley. Lori, where are you? There you are. Come on.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here as a business partner of NJPAC, as well as a member of Morgan Stanley, to preempt the introduction of the wonderful Carla Harris. She's truly an example and an inspiration within our organization. So the reason why we at the Green Jade Group are NJPAC business members is our mission, not only in wealth management, but also in our clients' lives, is to elevate their experience. So if it's either through simplifying the complexity of their wealth or helping them guide their philanthropic journey, or even just enhancing their lives through our invitation-only literary society or our year-end summit, at which Carla is speaking at the end of this year. We take that role in our clients' lives extremely seriously. And so by partnering with NJPAC as a business advisory council member, we are able to offer that next level programming to our clients, where we've had clients attend salons within the Joshua Bell performance, where we were able to offer an exclusive meet and greet with the executive president of the organization, as well as some refreshment during the intermission of that show. We are also entertaining clients at the Diana Ross concert later on in May, and expect some great it's Diana Ross. How could it not be fabulous? And so what we have found as being a partner of NJPAC is not only can we express our personal passion for the arts, but elevate our clients' lives. And so we encourage you, if you are not a business member, to explore it, because from our perspective, it has not only enriched our business, our clients' lives, but it has also engrossed and encompassed us within the community of Newark, and truly allowed us to express our passion for giving back to the community. So with that, thank you, and I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lori. I'm glad that this program is meaningful to you, and we're grateful for your support. The main event, folks, here we go. Let me first introduce your moderator, and that is Lata Reddy. Lata is the Senior Vice President of Inclusive Solutions at Prudential Financial, and she's chair of the Prudential Foundation. And she has for many years now, for as long as I've been here and longer, been a dear friend of this Arts Center. In her role at Prudential, where she has worked, by the way, since 1997, the year the Arts Center opened, Lata helps position the company to promote inclusive economic opportunity and sustainable growth. Under her leadership, Prudential became one of the first institutional investors to manage an impact investing portfolio with $1 billion in assets. She also oversees a yearly grant-making budget of $40 million through the Prudential Foundation and a $15 million corporate contributions budget. And you know, we're just about to start the construction of a master plan of our campus, 350 units of residential and an education center. And that master plan was inspired by Lata's team at Prudential. And because of them, we got to work with a firm called Replace Urban Planners. We created a master plan, and what we created is what is being built. And that hardly ever happens in real estate development, and so we're grateful to Prudential for that. Yes. Lata is the board chair of the Newark Alliance, and she was a leader of Mayor Baraka's Newark reopening and recovery strike force around the time of the pandemic. Lata, thanks for leading this conversation. Come on down.
Thank you, John, for that incredible and very warm introduction. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and you're going to see why in just a few moments, but it is first my pleasure to introduce Carla Harris. Carla is a Wall Street veteran with over 35 years of experience on the street, now serving as the senior client advisor at Morgan Stanley, having finished her active tour of duty there at the firm as a vice chairman. During her long career, she's executed some pretty significant transactions there, such as the initial public offering or the IPO of UPS, Martha Stewart Omnimedia, and the General Motors sub-IPO of Delphi Automotive, as well as the $3.2 billion common stock transaction for Immunex Corporation, which still stands as the largest biotechnology common stock deal in history. She was appointed by President Barack Obama in 2013 to chair the National Women's Business Council. She's an award-winning podcaster with 12 Marcon Awards, 2 Webby Awards, and 2 Anthem Awards under her belt for the podcast Access and Opportunity. She's an acclaimed motivational speaker, having been named a couple of weeks ago as one of the top 50 speakers in the world by Real Leaders and one of the top 40 female speakers in the world in 2020. She's a gospel recording artist with 4 commercially released CDs, 5 sold-out concerts at the Apollo Theater, and at Carnegie Hall, and 2 at the Apollo Theater. She is an author of 3 books, Expect to Win, Strategize to Win, and her most recent book, Lead to Win, which we'll be talking about this morning. She's a graduate of the Harvard Business School, second-year honors, and of Harvard University, magna cum laude. Please join me in welcoming Carla Harris. Good morning.
Well, good morning, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, believe it or not, folks, that was just a highlight of Carla's bio. There are many other things I didn't get to mention, but one thing that did catch my eye, Carla, is that in addition to all of those things, you are also very involved in the community. So maybe we could kick off the conversation by learning a little bit more about your background. And in fact, you said, we are blessed so that we can be a blessing to someone else. And I love that. If you could just share a little bit about your early years maybe and when being of service became a part of your ethos.
Sure. And I grew up in a community down in Jacksonville, Florida, and my folks were always involved in the community, especially my mother. And I'm Catholic. I'm cradle Catholic from 3 months old. So being involved in the church was, not an option at all. So I was doing that as well as giving back through bowling, believe it or not. I was in a junior bowling league, and we also did things around the community. So growing up, I did that, but I didn't become involved on boards until I actually started working. So, but even at Harvard undergrad, I served Harvard Business School. I served in various and sundry things and volunteered. But when I first came to New York as a first-year associate was the first time that I joined a nonprofit, and it was the Food Bank of New York City. And I'll tell you what attracted me to this organization was that the board believed that it was going to work itself out of a job. So the way they sold me on board service, they were like, we're not going to be here in 5 years, right? Because we're going to solve this problem. And at that point, the food bank was distributing 70,000 pounds of food in the 5 boroughs of New York. When I left as chair of the board, it was 77 million pounds. So the board, on the one hand, it's good that we were giving out more food, but on the other hand, it was bad that the board did not solve the problem, right? The problem only grew, and the face of the hungry grew. But from there, I was involved on the board of the Apollo, on the board of SEO, where I'm still on the board of SEO. I'm on the board of the Mother Cabrini Foundation. And I do feel that we are here, and the blessings that we get are so that we can bless somebody else. Otherwise, I really don't know what the point is. Right, so that's why I will, till I can't do it anymore, I will always be involved in some form of giving back. And for me, healthcare matters, education matters, obviously the arts, and children's education and the arts. If you think about the things that I'm involved in, they all sort of fit in those verticals.
All amazing organizations and critical work. So you've had an illustrious career in financial services and wealth management.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about that journey and how you made your way.
I didn't know anything about financial services at all. And the summer after my freshman year at Harvard, many of my friends had gone to New York to be in this program called the SEO program, which still exists. I see many of you know what it is. It's called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And in 1980, Mike Oshawas, who was the starter of SEO, had this eureka moment that one of the ways he could change the face of Wall Street was to get Wall Street to focus on kids of color for the 2-year analyst program. So in about 1980, all the major business schools, Harvard Business School, Stanford, Wharton, all of them said, we don't want to take undergrads anymore. We want people to have at least 2 years of work experience before we will bring them in to get their MBA. So Wall Street responded and created these 2-year analyst programs. Mike said, aha, if I can get these kids in for the summer, maybe this will be a feeder for these 2-year analyst programs. Well, after my freshman year at Harvard, my freshman year was 1980-81, and I said, I want to go home. I just want to go home, right? I made it through, hallelujah. I want to go home. But my friends went to this program. And when they came back our sophomore year, that's all they could talk about. But the thing that caught me was that they kept talking about how competitive it was, and they didn't take everybody, and it was really hard. And one thing you should know about me, I am negatively motivated. When you tell me I can't do something, I'm all over it like a bad smell, right? And so they were like, oh, it's really difficult, and it's going to be a stress interview. Girl, I didn't even know what a stress interview was, right? I didn't know I was supposed to be stressed when 3 people were interviewing me at the same time. I was just going through the interview and got the job as a sophomore, and that was the summer that changed the trajectory of my life. Because until then, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Because growing up black in the South, especially in the 60s and the 70s, people pushed you, if you were smart, into one of three lanes. Either be a teacher, or a doctor or a nurse, or be a lawyer. And I loved myself some Perry Mason, the original Perry Mason. Y'all know Raymond Burr, okay? I loved him, and I said, I could see myself doing that. So growing up, I kept saying, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer. And that summer, it changed it, because I looked around, and I thought about the things that attracted me to the law were actually found in business. I wanted to, call the shots, and I realized that the business people call the shots, and the lawyers help you get it done within the context of the law. The second thing is I wanted to have a lot of responsibility early on. And there I was at 19 years old, had never done this before, working on analysis from which people made the decision to issue hundreds of millions of dollars of bonds, because I was in public finance at the time. And the third thing was that I wanted to make a lot of money. And I was looking at those boys on Wall Street, and I had my Scooby moment. Wait a minute. They're making a lot of money. But I'll tell you, the thing that really did push me over the edge, again, this negative motivation, I did not see a lot of people who looked like me. I did not see a lot of women, and I certainly didn't see a lot of people of color. And I couldn't figure out why, because the work wasn't that hard. Remember, y'all, I was 19, so completely naive. And the work wasn't that hard. You know, it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, I took calculus at Harvard, but I have never used a day of calculus in my professional career, ever, right? So I knew it was something else, and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to do this. And I'll tell you that it's been a rewarding career, because even though I did not have a playbook, because of my spirituality and about whose I am, not who I am, I was able to not only navigate, but to learn through the journey. And as tough as those times were, and I was having a long conversation with a friend of mine just yesterday about it, you know, I am so grateful that I was of mind not to be deterred, but to learn. So every time it was a dark hole and I could not figure out how to get out, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is over, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel, and if there was light, I thought it was the train coming to run me over, right? I was able to get out of it and say, okay, what happened here? How did I get here? What should I have known? What should I have done? Because I always take responsibility first. There may be other people that are involved and other things that are making that circumstance happen, but at the end of the day, you're somewhat complicit even by your own ignorance, right? So I had to say, what didn't I know? What did I learn? And grab the pearl. And here's the other thing that I learned on that journey was that when life comes to teach you a lesson, if you don't pass the test, you will repeat the class. It's coming again. So even when you think you have learned the thing, make sure that you hold on to it, because it will pass your way again, and you need to be able to apply the pearl to say, aha, I've learned it. So that journey was what created Expect to Win. So those of you who have the first book, that's what I call the basic pearls. Those are all the things that I did not know, that I wish I had known, that I wanted to put down in one place so that people who found themselves in their career aspiring to ascend and not quite knowing how to navigate those environments, they would have a playbook.
All right, there's so much in what you just said, but and we'll get to the pearls in a moment, or the most recent set of pearls. But going back then to those earlier days, and you've said that people lead the way they were led. Yeah. And by the way, you're going to hear me say a lot, you said, because Carla, as you've already heard, will drop a lot of wisdom, and I'm just going to try to pick it up along the way. But it makes a lot of sense right on his face. But how were people leading when you first started out? What did it take to be successful?
All the things that you heard about Wall Street at the time in the late 80s and early 90s, like the 100-hour weeks, those were fact, not fiction. All that you heard about, there's not a lot of great managers there. All of that was true, because people led by intimidation and by fear. So those guys, and I'm going to say guys because it was disproportionately guys at that time, those guys, you know, that were on the trading floor, that had the big personalities, that were shouting expletives, or that were willing to dress down somebody right in the middle of the trading floor. That was real, right? Or the intimidation or the passive-aggressive nature, all of those things. And it was interesting to me that my contemporaries who also felt like, oh, this is a horrible experience, and who also had their own tough times, when we became senior, they were leading that way. Which is why I say that many people lead the way they were led. But when you know that that's not the right way to inspire people, you have to have the courage to go the other way. And even going the other way may cost you a little time, may cost you a little money, but at the end of the day, you become the guy or the gal that everybody wants to work for. And as you hear me talk about and Lead to Win, if you're sitting in a leadership seat right now, you want to be that guy, you want to be that gal that everybody wants to work for because they know that you are fair. Even if you are demanding, it's okay. But they know that you're fair. They know that you will give them their due. They know that you are liberal with the attaboys and the attagirls, and they know that you will listen. And I remember having bosses that did not provide me with the air cover that I believe every leader should provide their people with. If you're working for me, I say, I'm your air cover. So if she calls me and said you did X, Y, and Z, I'm not going to unload on you until I talk to you to figure out what's going on. I'm not going to take somebody else's word for it because you're mine, right? So if leaders would think about their people as you're mine, I belong to you and you belong to me, that changes the dynamic with respect to how you engage.
So let's get into Lead to Win. And in the book, you talk about the skills that leaders need today to be impactful, to be successful and effective. And those are leaders not just in corporate America, but regardless of the sector in which you sit. So we'll get into the skills in a minute. But could you first talk about the context and what changed over the past few years that so dramatically shifted the skills that are required of leaders?
Absolutely. So there were a few things that changed. Number one, millennials and Zers are now the dominant population in the workforce. That was the big shift. That's why I had the aha moment in the fourth quarter of 2018 that we were in a very different context that required a different type of leadership style because millennials and Zers demand as table stakes transparency, inclusivity, and feedback. And let's face it, if you're a boomer or an older Xer, you didn't get a lot of feedback along your career journey. You were told, keep your head down, work hard. If you don't get fired, that's how you know you're doing okay. But that kind of leadership style will never do. The transparency, they have had transparency their entire lives, right? We didn't have transparency as boomers and Xers. Your parents didn't tell you every single thing, and you certainly did not have the opportunity to express yourself. You were told children should be seen and not right. What do we do to millennial Zers? What's wrong? What would you like to have? You can have the chicken fingers, the hot dogs. You can have the blah, blah, blah. My parents say this in front of you. You're hungry, you better eat it, right? There weren't these choices, and there wasn't this level of transparency. And they've had that all their lives. And I say to boomer leaders and Xer leaders, why are you confused? We created these monsters. What are you talking about? Right? We gave them, and I'm being funny when I say monsters, but we as parents were very different than our parents. So we cannot expect now as leaders we're going to have different people that are working for us.
So you talk about, and here's where the pearls come in, the 8 pearls of intentional leadership, which refer to the actual skills, right, the attributes. So there's a lot in each of them, and we have time, so we're going to walk through them. The first one is authenticity, and we all talk a lot and hear a lot about bringing our authentic selves to work. And sometimes I hear colleagues joke about, well, we don't need to bring all of ourselves to work, but what does that mean to you, and how do you talk about it?
Yes, and it's one of the few concepts that I repeat in all 3 of my books is this concept of authenticity. It is your distinct competitive advantage because nobody can be you the way that you can be you. And I often hear other speakers and leaders say, oh, you have to have a measure of vulnerability if you're going to be a leader. And I don't think about it like that at all. I think if you are not being your authentic self, that's when there's a measure of vulnerability. Because let's face it, all of us can put on a face, all of us. And I would argue that women and people of color in particular have been unconsciously socialized to be able to put on that face and get along in any kind of environment. But here's the deal. At some point, the face is coming off. And if you have been walking in every day with the mask, you better hope you are in a place that when that mask falls off, they're going to be all right with that, right? But if you are bringing your authentic self all the time, then that's the thing that allows people to connect with you. That is the thing that allows people to trust you. Because just like you know when somebody is not being who they really are, they know when you're not either, right? And that is a thing that would prohibit someone from really trusting you. Now, this point that she's talking about, you know, you don't have to have all of you on display at the same time. We were talking, and I said to her, that is a mistake that young professionals make in particular. They believe that in order to be authentic, they have to have all of them on display at the same time, and you do not. Here's how you bring all of you into any room. Number one, know who you are. And I do not say that lightly, because I would argue pre-pandemic, we were all running around such that we failed to take the time to say, who am I in 2012? Who am I in 2015? Who am I relative to who I was in 17? And if you have not done it recently, you must, because there's not a person on the planet that hasn't been impacted in some way by the COVID-19 crisis or by witnessing the kind of social unrest on the back of racial inequities in this country and, frankly, around the world. So, number one, who are you? Number two, recognize that we are all multifaceted. There is not just one you. There's an inquisitive you. There's an intellectual you. There's an argumentative you. There's a listening you. We're all multifaceted. So embrace it and own it. Now, the third key to bringing all of you into any room is now you relax. Now you can relax and walk into any room, and you are now free to feel in the moment which facet of you will authentically connect with that one person on the other side of the conversation, the 15 people in the boardroom, or the 300 people in the auditorium. You literally are free to feel the energy. But if you're preoccupied with trying to speak or behave in a way that you think is going to be impressive, or the way you think they think you're supposed to act, then you're not going to be free to really feel that energy in the room and connect in a way that's authentic. So you don't have to bring you don't have to have all of you on display. When I walk into a boardroom, I can feel the energy. Is it Carla, the 37-year investment banker that has to show up today? Is it Carla, the reader? Is it Carla, the spiritual warrior? Is it Carla, the mom to a 3-year-old? Because sometimes those boys in the room are 3 years old. Yeah, yeah. Is it the mom that walks in the room? Is it the singer that walks in the room? Because the singer can feel an audience in a different way than the banker feels it, right? As my good friend Marilyn knows, my very first Carnegie Hall concert, I practiced 14 songs, ready to sing. I got to number 12, and I could feel I was on top of the hill. I said, Carla, if you sing one more note, you're going to slide on the other side of that hill. It can't get any better than this right here. So I looked at the audience. I said, good night, everybody. The audience and the choir said, wah, 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 wah. But I knew. And that's what you have to trust about your authenticity, whether you're leading or whether you are aspiring to be a leader. You know that you know. We all have those feelings. The trick is maturing enough to trust it.
You also talk about building trust. And what I love about that is, I've heard you talk about it as extending all the way into the market-facing piece of, right, what you do. So could you talk about trust and what some of the behaviors are that build trust?
Absolutely. And that's the second pearl of intentional leadership. And the way that you build trust is that you simply deliver over and over and over again. My evidence, think about the people in your personal life that you trust. Maybe you're thinking about the folks that are taking care of your kids. Maybe you're thinking about the people who are looking after your parents. Maybe you're thinking about that one person, only person you let get near your hair with a pair of shears, right? Or that one restaurant, every time it's important, that's where you go. Because you know the food is outstanding and the service is impeccable. Why do you trust them? They have delivered over and over and over again. So whenever you're trying to build trust, You find out what the other person values. And here's the deal. People will always tell you what they value. They will always tell you what they value. You need only ask the question and create the space where they can define that which they value. And then you strategize on how you deliver on that value proposition. The mistake that many of us make, especially people in our business and financial services, when we're trying to sell a product, we're going in there, we're going to have that meeting, we're going to sell you that product, and we're thinking about what arguments we're going to make, we're thinking about how we're going to get you to pay attention, we're thinking about how we're going to close the sale, instead of saying, what do you need? What can I help you with today? You know, how can I be of service today? Because putting yourself in a position where you are serving someone else now puts you in a valued position. And you may not close a sale today, but by being of service, that person is thinking, boy, she came to help me, right? And I can't tell you how many clients I've won over because I've been willing to invest. And I say, I'm going to think of 4 things I can do before I ever ask for anything. So by the time I ask for anything, that person is thinking, well, she did A, she did B, she did C, she did D. And most of the time they're thinking, I can't not give her something. And like I said, that's all I need is a little bit of an opening. I can wiggle my hips through the rest of that and land and expand. But I'm starting with, how can I serve you? And the rest will come every single time.
I love that. We talk about you can only move at the speed of trust. And particularly when we're talking about in financial services, reaching into communities that have not been well served typically by financial services. And so that trust factor being so important. And it starts with our own employees, right? Employees.
Amen.
You also talk about creating clarity.
Yes.
And in this world where things are moving so quickly, and especially in corporate America with all the changes and transformations that are happening, how do you deliver clarity to people?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I say as a great leader, it is your job to define what success looks like. When you fail to define what success looks like, that's when you create a tremendous amount of frustration on the food chain. Your people know that you're not happy, but they don't know what it takes to get you to happy. And you know you should be able to get more from your teams, and you don't know why you're not getting it. So even like as she said, when things are moving quickly and you really don't have full visibility, it is still your job, if you're choosing to sit in that leadership seat, it is still your job to define what success looks like. And you can't be so afraid of making a mistake that you fail to define what success looks like. Because here's the deal, when you define what success looks like, then your team will consistently outperform. Because I believe as humans, we are wired to deliver beyond that which has already been defined. Right? And if you realize you made a mistake and you're on the wrong journey, take a page out of the technology industry's book. You fail fast. You extract that lesson and invest that lesson in the next try, getting that much closer to the success. Remember, as leaders in today's market, nobody is expecting you to have all the right answers. You cannot, because the rate of innovation is so quick today. It used to be things changed every 10 years. Can anybody say Discman? Can anybody say cassette tape? Can anybody say an 8-track, MP3, right? Just think about it. In our lifetime, right? It used to be every 10 years. Now it's barely 10 months before you buy a phone. I just went and bought a Samsung 23, and the next day I saw a commercial for the 24. I'm like, what? Why didn't he tell me the 24 was coming? Just bought the 23. That's how fast. So you cannot, by definition, know all the answers and be an expert because things are changing so quickly. Nobody expects that of leaders today, but they do expect you to be decisive. They do expect you to be able to anticipate. Remember, leadership is no longer about oversight. It is about insight. People want you to think about where the hurdles might be. What can you do to look around the corner and anticipate what might happen? Are you the kind of leader that can attract resources internally and externally? Are you the kind of leader that other leaders want to collaborate with, want to partner with? Because it's all about partnership and collaboration, which I also talk about in the book. You remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, you heard words like black box. And in our world, secret sauce. You don't hear those words anymore, right? You hear open architecture, open AI. Everything is about partnership and collaboration. And he or she that is seen as a leader in the marketplace, in your industry, that's known as somebody who can attract that kind of talent and partnership, that's the leader that's going to be the most successful. That's the leader that's going to be highly valued and highly paid internally. Why? Because your colleagues know that everybody else is coming for you. And they have to create a value proposition to keep you in the seat because you're seen in the industry as that girl or that guy that everybody wants to work with, just to return to the beginning of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And so you also talk about how leaders need to create other leaders. And I think many of us have heard, been told, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. But I think you're talking about something different.
Yes, absolutely. I talk about creating other leaders as the fourth pearl of intentional leadership. Because here's the deal. If all roads lead back to you, then by definition, you will cap your own success and the organization's success because you are one woman, you are one man. So the way that you amplify your impact in any organization is to create other leaders. And here's the deal. Here's the corollary. Now you are seen in the marketplace as the kingmaker and the queenmaker. And going back to that, everybody wants to work for you because they know working for you puts them in a position to lead. And your colleagues and your shareholders and your board sees now that you're creating ambidextrous leaders. You now pretty important in that organization. So selfishly, think about yourself as the kingmaker or the queenmaker. And it used to be the case, especially as traditionalists and boomers, people wanted to keep all the power. Nobody is going to have the power all the time. And here's the deal, older boomers and older Xers, if you fail to invest in those coming behind you and you find yourself 35, 40 years in the game and you choose to stay on the playing field, nobody's going to have you in that leadership seat at this point because the law of the jungle is the next generation needs to occupy the seat. But yet you may choose to play. Well, those who you could have invested in 10 years ago are now the decision makers, right? And I look around now, and I did not invest in other people because I was thinking about that, because what I'm telling you now, I didn't even think about that when I was 40 years old, just a couple years ago, right? But I will tell you, it's interesting now as I look at not only my own organization, but other organizations in the marketplace, in other industries. Now I can say, that's mine. She's mine. He's mine. So I say to myself, even after something, if I really wanted another job, another place, a couple phone calls I could make that happen because of the investments that I made along the way. So even if you're not doing it for all the right reasons, do it for the selfish reason, that you create some optionality for yourself down the road.
Diversity. Talk about that.
Yes, I tell you, this is one of my favorite topics. And here's my thesis. It is one of the pearls of intentional leadership because I believe that innovation is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries, including the arts, right? And if you agree with me that innovation is the dominant competitive parameter, then you have to agree with me that you need a lot of ideas in the room. Because after all, innovation is born from ideas. Well, if you need a lot of ideas in the room, you need a lot of perspectives in the room because ideas are born from perspectives. If you need a lot of perspectives in the room, you need a lot of experiences in the room because perspectives are born from experiences. And if you need a lot of experiences in the room, you better start with a lot of different people in the room because experiences are born from people. So you must start with a lot of different people in the room in order to get to that one innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. That is the commercial imperative around diversity. And the question that I get almost every time I speak is, diversity is under siege because of what the Supreme Court did last summer. Let me be clear. The Supreme Court decision was an educational decision. It has nothing to do with the way businesses and organizations operate. businesses and organizations have been operating under a different set of rules and legislation. But if we allow the conversation to seep into a business room and we are in that room and we don't say anything, then shame on us. But the minute you hear somebody challenging the value of diversity in a room that you're in, you just say, why are we talking about that right now? We've done this for the last 5 years or the last 10 years, and our aspiration is to, and here's your script. If you're in the room and it comes up, I'm going to give you your script. Why are we thinking about doing anything other than providing excellence to our constituencies or excellence to our customers? And we believe having the best talent in the marketplace is the only way to create shareholder value. And if we're going to have the best talent in the marketplace, we all know that talent is evenly distributed and opportunity is not. So we want to put ourselves in the way to get the best talent, no matter what it looks like, because it's all about bringing value to our shareholders or our customers. I didn't hear you. I'm not talking about applause, but my point is, you're not going to hear anything in that room. You're not going to hear any retort. And just to check it, you should say, and then you say, next point, right? But you can't let the fear get into the room and you don't say anything, because crap undefended becomes law. Okay? We all know it. We all have been in rooms when we knew the decision was going in the wrong direction on something, on resources, on whatever, and we just look down at our room, at our feet. You can't do that. If you're in the room, you have power. And if you have power, you have a responsibility to speak. Otherwise, I have to ask you, why are you in the room? All right? You got in the room because you earned the right to be in the room. Nobody gave it to you. You earned the right to be in the room. And if you're in the room, you have responsibility.
+1 to all of that. You mentioned innovation and the importance of diversity to foster innovation. What else can leaders do, or should they do to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, put yourself in the traffic, to make sure. And you should also make sure that you're teaching your teams how to innovate, which is another one of the pearls that we talk about in the book. And it's your job to do that, because most people are afraid to fail. And if they are afraid to fail, they're not going to innovate. You have to create an environment as a leader where you tell your teams, it's okay to make a mistake. I'm not going to shoot you because you make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, that means you were reaching for something. I like that. Now, let's just make sure that we can correct it, we can fail fast, extract the lesson, and invest in the next time, right? But you have to create that environment, because as a leader, if you have a markedly adverse reaction to somebody on your team taking a risk and it doesn't work out, they're not going there again. As my grandmother say, a burnt child is afraid of fire. So if you have a markedly adverse reaction, your people won't go there. But if you are constructive and productive in your response, then your teams will try, fail, iterate. Try, fail, iterate. Try, fail, iterate, innovate. That's what you'll get.
Another pearl, inclusivity.
Yes.
As we all know, is distinct from diversity. So talk about how you be an inclusive leader.
Yes. If you want to show up in your environment as an inclusive leader, you simply solicit other people's voices. Solicit other people's voices. When you bring your teams together, you say, I'm going to start this conversation, not because I'm the smartest person in the room, but because I'm the most seasoned, not old, person in the room. I'll get us started. Now, Abby, I want you to add on to my argument. Brad, I want you to add on to what Abby has said. Now, Chandra, I want you to play devil's advocate. Blow up the argument. Give us the other side. What's the alternative? Damon, I want you to add on to what Chandra has said. What have you done? You have now done two important things. The first is that you said, I see you. You invited each of them into the solution-making process by name, which means you have to engage enough with your teams that you can authentically invite them into the solution-making process by name. And here's the deal. Who doesn't value being seen by the boss? The second thing that you've done is that you said, I hear you. Not only did you invite them to specifically contribute, but you invited them to support or refute the argument that was on the floor. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Everybody values being heard. Everybody values being heard. When you say to anyone, did I understand you to mean? Let me repeat what I think you said. The person is thinking, wow, she was listening. Wow, he heard me. And you are generating immediate currency that you can now reinvest back into that relationship. But here's the intended consequence of what you have done. You've now put everybody's fingerprints on the blueprint. Everybody on your team is now equally invested in the success or failure of that endeavor. And as leaders, y'all know it doesn't get any better than that.
So the eighth pearl, and you referred to this in your answer to a question a few minutes ago, but it's your voice.
Yes.
The importance of voice.
If you're going to be a leader in today's environment, you must be willing to call a thing, no matter how bad the thing might be. And I would argue the worse the thing is, the more important it is that you give voice to it. Because when you fail to give voice to it, now you undermine your authenticity that you've been working so hard to demonstrate. But more importantly, you undermine the trust that you're trying to build, because your teams already know there's going to be a restructuring. They already know if there could be a reduction in force. So when you fail to give voice to it, now you're not being transparent. And transparency is a critical ingredient to building trust. And as Lata knows, the thing that I always talk about when I have the privilege and the honor of speaking in front of a group of people is that I believe that we fail to give voice to things because we're scared. We're just scared. It's fear. And hear me clearly. If you remember nothing else about our conversation this morning, remember that fear has no place in your success equation. Fear has no place in your success equation. Anytime you approach anything in your life, personally or professionally, from a position of fear, you always underpenetrate that opportunity. And if you feel it creeping up the back of your neck, remind yourself of the old Southern saying that fear is just false evidence of things appearing real. It's really not there, because what's the worst that can happen if you take a risk and it doesn't work out? So you fail. But guess what? Failure always brings you a gift, and that gift is called experience. Now you know how to do it better. Now you know how to do it differently. Now you know how to do it successfully. At the margin, always worth taking the risk.
I have to ask, is there anything about the order of the pearls? I mean, I spoke about them in the order that they're, but do you always do it that way?
I generally always do it that way because I think it's easier, especially with the vignettes that I tell when I'm doing a stand and deliver format. But I do think it helps people sort of think about them, especially by the time you get to voice, because the voice thing is real. Most people don't say what they could say, what they should say. They give away their power by not speaking, which is one of the reasons that I talk about voice.
And you've talked about the common thread or strand through
yes.
all the pearls.
So at the end of most of my talks, I say that while I've given you the pearls of intentional leadership, the strand that holds the pearls together is courage. Because it takes courage to call a thing a thing. Like I've said, we all been in rooms when we should have said something and we look down at our shoes. It takes courage to invite people into the solution-making process and show up as an inclusive leader. It takes courage to teach people how to fail, especially millennials and Zers, who I think are even more afraid of failing than boomers and Xers. It takes courage to be intentional about diversity, especially in fast-paced, highly competitive, dynamic environments. We're all vulnerable to unconscious bias. I don't care who you are, where you're from. We're all vulnerable to unconscious bias. It takes courage to create other leaders, especially when you are unsure of your own leadership trajectory. It takes courage to create clarity when you can't see. It takes courage to engage and earn, build, and retain trust. And it takes courage to bring your authentic self into any environment, which is why so many people are challenged to do so. If you want to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader, you got to expect and strategize so you can lead to win.
On that theme of courage and connecting it to it's so interesting because I don't think most leaders at the top of the house now thought about courage in the sense of authenticity, right? Bringing their authentic self to work. And yet in the last 5 years or so, right, people have had to face that head on. But the CEOs of today, others weren't trained in that. We didn't come up that way. And I would dare say that those in succession plans, right, currently were not necessarily oriented that way. Have you seen signs of success that people are really internalizing this and that they're in it for the long haul versus trying to let it pass?
Yeah, I'll tell you that I think the pandemic was another shift, and I didn't complete answering your question early on when you talked about what has changed and why we need a new kind of leadership. It's not just that millennials and Zers are in the workplace today in a dominant proportion, but it's also because of the pandemic. And the pandemic created a dynamic where your authenticity was being demanded, and your empathy was being demanded, if not required, by the people that you were working with. So I am seeing that 4 years later now, people are slowly but surely becoming more comfortable with being authentic. Because if you were building your career like me in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a prescription for how you got to the top. And if you followed the prescription, you pretty much got to the top. And it never required you to bring your authentic self into that seat. But now, especially because of the pandemic, we were in a position where there was equity that was created. You said equity. Well, we were all looking at each other in a box, the same size. There was a measure of equity. Because before, if you had to come to the 40th floor to see me as a leader, that whole dynamic of getting on the elevator, having to go all the way to 40, getting off on the beautiful floor, all of that was distracting and creating a hierarchy in your own mind that affected even the way you spoke to me. But now you're looking at me through the Zoom like, let me see. Was that a cat? Right? So now I am as vulnerable as you are. There's a measure of equity. So in order to impact you as a leader, I have to bring it differently now, right? I don't have all the accoutrement and the distractions that create a different dynamic.
Are you seeing boards lead differently or companies recruit for different skill sets?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, because I also think that boards are a lot more intentional than they used to be about succession planning. So that is another thing that is happening that I think is creating a different dynamic. And boards are certainly have been on point around DEI and B more than they ever were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I do believe that that is creating a different dynamic. And as you get more diverse board rooms, people are asking different questions. You know, what does the succession line look like? Why do we only have this woman as the person that's going to succeed you? And one of the things that I say in my boards is that every CEO needs to have choices, right? It shouldn't just be her. Right? She may get up today and say, okay, no mas, I'm done. And then what? Right? So you want to have 2 or 3 people that you think are good enough athletes that could potentially take your seat, especially in the event of an untimely demise for you. Right? And I do think boards are much more intentional about asking those questions these days.
You also talk about some of the gaps in leadership that you've seen. Could you talk about?
Yeah, that's one of the chapters that I have in the book. I think it's chapter 9 around leadership gaps. We all have them. And one of the most important things you can do when you get tapped on the shoulder and now you're the leader, is to think about where your gaps are. And there are gaps with respect to not preparing your bench, not investing in your people. Because, again, something happens, you move on, and now you leave the organization in a very vulnerable position. One of my gaps was not making decisions quick enough around people, especially when I knew someone should no longer be in that seat, right? That was a big gap for me, and I had to ask myself, why? You're so decisive on everything else. Why are you slow to remove people? And I realized that it was cultural because, again, growing up black in the South, people would always say, you got one shot. You got one shot. You don't have as many shots as everybody else, so you better be really careful. You have one. And I always thought, man, that's not fair. And when I get in a position, I'm going to make sure people have more than one chance. But when I got in that position, they had one chance. They had 2 chances. They had 3 chances. And I'll tell you what really helped me. I was having this conversation with Ursula Burns, and I said this was my gap. And she said, Carla, I had the same gap. And I said, really? She said, yeah, but I'll tell you what helped me. She said, another leader pulled me to the side, and she said, you know, anytime you fail to remove a bad leader, you hold the rest of the organization hostage. Yeah. And that was like, to me, and I thought, wow, what talent am I leaving on the table? What creativity am I leaving on the table? What innovation am I leaving on the table because I can't see it because I have a bad leader actually pushing all of that down? What happens if I free up that talent? What might I get? And from that day to this one, I'm no longer slow around making those decisions.
So we're going to go to audience Q&A in just a moment. I'm going to ask one more question. You've been such an inspiration to so many people, someone that people look up to for both your leadership and for what you symbolize, that people who look like us right, can rise to the top levels of one of the top companies in the world. Who are some of the people you admired?
Yeah, I'll tell you, my biggest inspiration was definitely my parents and my paternal grandmother. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. My mother was the master multitasker. She was a wife. She was a mother. She had a career. She had an avocation that she was wildly crazy about. Bingo. And she and she was very, very involved in the community. So I grew up thinking that as a woman I could do anything. Right? So I'm not one of those leaders that say, oh, you got to make choices. I do believe you can have it all. It's about how you define all for you. My father had very high expectations, as did my mother of me, but he always made me feel like I was supposed to do well, that there was nothing special about me. I'm not a super brain or anything like that. You're just supposed to get A's, so go get them. So the idea that it was something I was supposed to do never made it feel like it was something that was a Herculean task. It was something I was supposed to do. And my paternal grandmother was the first female entrepreneur that I ever met, and she was wildly successful, and she was no joke. And it was interesting because she was a great people person. She would speak harshly to her customers, but they all loved her. They all loved Miss Emma. And I believe that she is probably unconsciously the person that inspired me to also be a banker, because my grandmother did so well in her business. People in the neighborhood would come in and say, Miss Emma, can you loan me $20 till payday? Miss Emma, I need to pay the light bill. Can you loan me some money? She said, yeah, here, baby. Now, you borrowed 20. Now, you know you owe me 40 on Friday, right? And, by the time I could do math, I was like, Grandmama, that's 100% interest. And she say, that's right, baby. How bad do you want it, right?
All right. I know there must be questions, so. Great. Go. Oh, there's a microphone coming to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. I think I speak for everyone when I say my notebook is full, for sure. So my name is Brittany Hale, and I provide clarity, confidence, and capital to leaders who are looking to align their business strategy with their values. So you talking about authenticity, and I'm a millennial, so, we are not all monsters.
I was being funny. I said that, right.
One of the questions when you brought up authenticity was around, the question that I have is around emotional professionalism. That is something that I talk a lot about to people who are individual contributors, becoming people managers, millennials who are ascending into leadership. They want to bring all of themselves. But again, there's a spectrum, right? So I'm curious to know if you have a perspective on emotional professionalism, or any insight to anyone in this room about how they can put that into practice.
Sure. Every environment has a culture. And it's important that if you want to be successful in that culture, that you understand the culture and that you make an authentic decision, that you're all right with that culture when you make the decision to go there. So, for example, it would have been inauthentic for me to say I want to be a banker if I was not willing to dress this way, right? If I wanted to wear jeans and a cutoff, shirt, that is not the uniform. Right? Every culture has a way that it engages, and it also has a uniform in that culture. So I say to people that emotional professionalism, you need to understand what is accepted in that culture. And so you can't just say, well, I'm going to just go do whatever I want to do, and it should be okay because I should be able to be me. No. Authenticity says, if you're going to be authentic about the decision to go there, then you need to be authentic about being willing to be within that culture in the way that that culture requires, right? And so that is what you have to be willing to do. Now, as far as emotion with crying and those sorts of things, well, again, back in the 80s and 90s, when I started, one of the things that people used to say all the time about women is that men didn't want to work with women because women were so emotional. They cried, right? And I was like, I'm never going to let them see me sweat, and I'll be doggone if they're going to see me cry, right? So even sometimes when those tears would get right there, I'd be blinking them back, because that was just not going to happen. And again, part of the reason, even though I might have felt that way authentically, I didn't want to do that, is I also authentically didn't want to confuse the messages about who I was in that moment or beyond. So again, you have to go through those things in the moment. Now, I also knew that at some point, if I got to the point and I could not help myself, I already had my narrative ready. If I started to cry, I'd be like, I'm crying now, but don't let the tears fool you, right? I was ready if that happened. And I made it all the way through. And I'll tell you, the closest that I got was the day that I got promoted to managing director. I got that phone call to come up to the 40th floor, and I walked in there, and all the senior boys were standing there. And Peter Karches, God rest his soul, said, we just want to congratulate our newest partner. And I could feel my face getting hot. I could feel the tears coming. And I turned around. I said, wait, because I had to get myself together. And I turned around, and they were crying. And I was like, oh, my gosh.
Yes, we've got a question up here.
Carla, thank you so much. I'm a big fan. I have
Thank
your
you.
3 books. I've been following you. I'm a fellow author and speaker. And the question that I have for you is, as women, we have a hard time placing ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
And you were mentioning before knowing whose you are. And I see in you this wisdom and this strength. And I'm sitting here wondering, when Carla is alone with Carla, what practices, what habits, what do you do daily to inspire in you the strength and the wisdom that you carry that to me tells me you know your essence?
Yes.
And then you bring it out to the world. So what do you do when Carla is with Carla?
Girl, when I'm by myself, I'm talking to Jesus. I had to laugh because I do that on a regular. I do it on a regular. When I have a quiet moment, I was just saying to my trainer this morning, I said, there's a lot going on. I just sang 2 funerals back to back. People are getting sick. And I said, something's going on in the air. There's a season happening right now. I said, and when I leave you, I'm going to get real quiet. I might even treat myself to a bagel. And he was like, what? All this working out? I'm like, yeah, I might have to have a bagel. I said, and I'm going to sit in my car, and I'm going to commune with Jesus. And that's exactly what I did. I left that training session, went straight to the bagel place, got me a bagel, sat in my car, and talked to Jesus before I came here. Yeah.
Thank you, Carla. This is such a great inspirational time for me.
Thank you.
And I'm an author as well. I wanted to know, with women, we tend to be a little shy when it comes to negotiating salary. And when we join a job and when we're on our year-end review, and we're not up to where the men are yet. How do we first of all, how do we negotiate when we first get the job, when we go to our year-end review, and how do we bring ourselves up to where the men are as far as salary differences?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question, because we didn't have an opportunity to bring it up. And you are so right. And part of the reason that women are behind men is that there are more men in very, very senior positions that are higher paying. So when you do the math, there's certainly going to look like there's an inequity simply because there are more bodies in the big seats. But one of the other issues, among others, is that we poorly negotiate when we're going in. And your master leverage, your biggest leverage, is when you're going into the role. Because if you negotiate poorly and you start off behind, it is very difficult to catch up. Because even when you show the organization that you are behind, they'll go, well, the maximum raise for everybody this year was 7%. We're giving you 10. But it doesn't matter that you 35% behind, right? So it's your job when you're going in to make sure that you understand the market value of the seat. Every seat has a market value. And back in the late 80s and 90s, it was hard to find out what that was because things were not as transparent as they are now. But there's Glassdoor, there's Mercer.com, there's Salary.com, there are folks here from Korn Ferry. There's so much information that's out there where you can get the market value of the seat, the low and the high. So when you're going in to negotiate, and now we are in an environment where it's illegal in most states for a prospective employer to ask you what you're making. And that used to be the thing that everybody would hold on to. So you must know the market value of the seat. So when you are given an offer, if it is below the value of the seat, your response, here's your script. Your response should be, wow, I'm so glad that you've given me this offer because I too agree that I would make a great team member and I could hit the ground running and contribute to your organization. But I also did my homework before I came. And the market value of the seat is between X and Y. So if your offer was between X and Y, I'd hit that bid right now. That's your answer. And you got to be willing to hold it because here's the deal. Anytime an employer is looking to hire someone, they've already put that salary in the budget. What number do you think they put in the budget? The highest number that's in that range. Why? Because nobody wants to say, John, I found a great candidate, but I need another 25. Nobody wants to go back to the boss and ask for more money. So they always put the highest number in the budget. So now you need to make sure that you're asking. Now, let's say you're on a job and you realize that you're way behind. Now you can have a conversation and you say, hey, listen, I've been doing some homework and I know the market value of the seat is between X and Y and I'm making J. So, and you and I both know that I am contributing at least X. What can we do to make sure I can get up to X? Now, here's what you got to be willing to do. Your boss is going to say, well, that's just, that is what it is. Now you say, Tom, I don't want to put you at risk. I'm prepared to go talk to John myself. I'll carry my paper. If he's going to blast anybody, let him blast me because it's really important to me that I am paid at the value of my contribution, and I'm contributing. You have to be willing to do that because if people think you are so afraid that you won't do that, there's nothing that's going to change, right? I'll tell you my quick experience, and then I know we got to roll, is that one of my colleagues came to me one day, and we were just having a conversation, and he said, I tell those boys every year what I want to get paid. And I thought, I was like, and what language do you use? Like, how do you do that? I could not imagine how to fix my mouth to go and say I want to get paid a certain amount because in my naivete, I thought if I delivered and I brought it, of course I would be paid fairly. But in financial services, almost everything is discretionary. We get paid a base salary, but 90% of her compensation and mine is discretionary. They pick a number for the bonus based on the class, based on your contribution. So it bothered me. And let's say, for example, that year my class was getting paid between $150,000 and $300,000. And I kept thinking about it. I said, Carla, what if you don't say anything and you get paid $150,000? But suppose you say something and you get paid $300,000. Is your fear worth $150,000? And I said to myself exactly what you all are thinking. So I began to practice, and I'm a big fan. If you watch my YouTube channel, I talk about practicing in the mirror because so often you think you know what you're going to say, but you never hear your voice out loud. And when you get ready to say it, it gets stuck or it doesn't come out the way you want. So I practice in the mirror. I want to get paid. I want to get paid. I want to get paid. And I kept practicing until I was comfortable in saying it in a way that I thought would be palatable. I went into my boss and I said, listen, it's really important to me that I get paid at the highest level in my class this year because I've had an amazing year. And it's important that it's recognized. Now, my understanding is the way you guys figure out compensation is first how the company does, second, how the department does, and third, how you do. I can't speak to the other two, but I had an amazing year, and it's important that it gets recognized. I know you can't tell me anything, but you needed to know, and I got out of there. Now, did I get paid? Yes. Absolutely. And here's the deal. Every year that I failed to have the conversation, I could see it on the page. It is not a one and done. There's one person that has responsibility for your compensation and for your success and all your promotions, and that's you. You got to be willing to call it and speak.
Great advice. We have time for one more question. There we go.
Good morning.
My name is Adela. I'd just like to know, what would your 20-year-old self tell your 50-plus self about investing for those who are afraid at certain ages?
Okay, about what would I tell my 20-year-old self about investing? I would say,
Your 50-plus.
she said, what would my 50-plus, thank you, girl. What would my 50-plus-year-old self tell my 20-some-year-old self? And here's what I would tell her. Start early. Start early, and don't be afraid to diversify. So if you know nothing about investing, first of all, you can talk to my friend over here, but if you know nothing else about investing, I try to tell young people, I'm like, what kind of shoes you have on? Oh, you got some Jordans, you got some this, you some. I said, ooh, that sounds like Nike. You need to buy some stock. You know, when's the last time you were at McDonald's? You need to buy some stock. So if you know nothing else, start with the things that you're already spending your money on. And then I just told a young lady yesterday who's getting her first job, because I spoke at Howard, open an E-Trade account, right? I said, because all you have to do, they're going to ask you a bunch of questions that will let the AI know what your risk level is, how old you are, what your trajectory looks like, and it'll give you a ready-made portfolio, right? I said, and for now, until you can get educated, do that, and put $50 every paycheck in it. You know, I told her I started something when I was a second-year associate, $15,000. I looked at it the other day, and it had a 4 handle on it. 6 digits, no decimals, right? And I have done nothing. I did nothing of that, forgot about it, right? I said, so you got to start doing that now. And biggest mistake I made at 26, my mother told me to buy some land. And many of y'all have people down south that's not paying the taxes on the land, and it ends up going to the state. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Some of that is $20,000, $30,000. If you got to borrow the money, buy the land, because land rarely depreciates. But because I was so ignorant, I didn't touch it. Well, that land sold 7 years later for $40 million because the state wanted to put a highway through it. But I had just saved money. I had just saved some money. I had 5 figures in my bank account. I was like, oh, it's going to go to 0. And because I didn't know. And my mother, God bless her, she was an educator. She didn't really know, but her gut was telling her, buy the land. And I didn't trust it. Big, big financial mistake. So that's what I would tell my 20-year-old self. What you invested in, Carla? What are you invested in? A mutual fund, I don't care what it is. Put it somewhere other than in the bank.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So on top of everything that Carla has just shared with us, we're in for a special treat. She has agreed to perform a song for us. Please join me in thanking and welcoming Carla Harris.
But before we do that, can we give my girl here a hand for being the best moderator? And this is Mr. Brandon, who's going to help a sister out here. Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? 'Cause Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow,
for me. And I sing because I'm happy. And I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. And I sing because I'm happy. And I sing because I'm free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches